So very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for taking time out of what is, I know, a very busy day. You also know, most of you, that we have a program of thought leadership, guest speakers that we invite to our floor to talk to contemporary issues of the day. This has been running for about 2 years, and it's a wonderful privilege to host Adrian Saville, Professor Adrian Saville, with us again today. For those that don't know Adrian, and I'm sure that's those in the minority, because Adrian has a lot of exposure in the public domain at the moment and for some time. Adrian is Professor Adrian Saville from Gordon Institute of Business Science. He is a professor of economics, finance and strategy. Alongside his 25 years of academic experience, Adrian has also very successfully curated a portfolio of success in multi-asset management advisory segment, recently founding Boundless World in his entrepreneurial endeavor, an advisory firm that has exposure across capital markets, business model innovation and growth strategy. We had the privilege as High Street of being the primary sponsor for the South African Restructuring Insolvency Practitioners Association end-of-year conference last year. As one of the innovative initiatives that we undertook, we actually put Adrian forward. We sponsored Adrian as the keynote speaker to that conference. He was also on 2 panels. One was a fireside chat, and the other was where he moderated a panel of experts. The theme for that Saripa conference was leveling up. So their theme that drove the narrative on the day spoke to lifting, raising the bar on performance. And I must say, I was proud to have Adrian there with us, because he certainly raised the bar in the first couple of the sessions for the conference, and was spoken of long afterwards too. So Adrian, that was phenomenal, and we thank you again for that. In that particular conference, in his keynote, Adrian spoke about building brilliance in upside-down markets, the challenges of geopolitical change, new models, mindsets, and markets. Today, we're going to be spending some time with Adrian talking about the age of fracture, power politics, and a new global map. I'm not a futurist like Adrian, and not a strategist like him by any means, but if I look into my ball, I can predict that you're all going to be very invested in Adrian's next 25 minutes. He's a terribly engaging speaker, and I must say his topics are always very thought-provoking. So Adrian, again, with great pride, I welcome you to the podium, and please, everybody, enjoy the next 25 minutes. Thanks, Adrian.
Right, good afternoon. It ticked over. It's great to be with you. You can see here the creation of this morning, where with the help of some AI, I got my artistic talents out. I'll warn you again, for those of you who've been in these presentations, I made it to grade 10 with art before it was suggested that I go and perhaps pursue another subject. So here is my brilliance of grade 10 art thrown at you, trying to embody essentially the new forces that are at play, helping us map or remap the world, power, politics, and a new global map. Greg, thank you for affording me the opportunity to open your auction, and for the very kind words you say about our time together last week. We sit in the middle of a sea change politically. If you look back over the past 18 months, the order of the day has been disruption when it comes to political arrangements. Over the course of 2024, more people went to the polls than any year in history, both as a percentage of world population and, of course, in absolute numbers. It was a year of democratic process. in and of itself, I think that's a striking outcome, that you have half of the world's population going into a democratic process. But what was even more astonishing through this was that first, democracy held. If you look at the colors of the map, overwhelmingly, the democratic process, the institutions that sustain democracy held. Inside of that, almost everywhere, we saw change. And it starts far on the west of the map with Claudia Sheinbaum being elected as head of state in Mexico. You know, why I single her out, although this wasn't a change in political party, a conservative Catholic society elects a Jewish woman as head of state. And that sort of set the tone for what happens next. As we rolled through the year, Macron in France calls a snap election. He's snapped to a different reality. Modi can't form a majority government in India without coalition. He needs coalition partners to form government. In Bangladesh, the woman who's elected as to head of state is ousted in social protests a month after her election. If we go to the UK, the Conservatives become a Labour government. Of course, November was the big drama in the United States where Republicans replace Democrats. Botswana, 58 years you've had a party in power. And after 58 years, Botswana changes its mind and we say, no, it's time for new. South Africa does the same. African National Congress is displaced by a government of national unity, and we are not done. Because as we roll into 2025, or roll out of 2025 and finish this extraordinary democratic period, Japan changes its mind about who should be in charge. And Mexico-like, although they keep the same party in control, they have elected a woman to head the LDP, and so Japan has its first female head of state. Change is underway. If I haven't convinced you, we get a woman elected head of state to Ireland just a week back. So Takeichi Sainai is the woman who takes charge of the LDP in Japan, and she says, work-life balance, what nonsense. We've got work to do. History can be a useful guide, and I'm going to rewind all the way to the late 1980s, where Ronald Reagan famously stands in front of the Brandenburg Gate and implores Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down this wall, open these gates, tear down the Berlin Wall, open the gates that lock East away from West. And that iconic speech is really what marks the extraordinary period of change where Eastern Europe is reintegrated, the Soviet Union is dissolved, China is already making strides onto the global stage. But this period through the 1990s and into the noughties brought with us an epoch of globalization, global integration, where increasingly people, ideas, money, goods, services move across borders. This is what has characterized the late 1980s to now, with Ronald Reagan giving us the defining moment, or what I choose as the defining moment. And you might call this sort of political power, that by applying the forces of diplomacy, applying the forces of foreign engagement, Reagan and allies are able to bring about this remarkable change, because over the course of the next 25 years, more people are pulled out of poverty than any time in human history. It is a spectacular period for world economic arrangements. And it's not done, because as these emerging markets emerge, they are changing the driving forces of the world economy. The red line that you see here is the BRICS Plus, and the blue line is the G7. The G7 is the old guard, the old forces. The BRICS Plus are the new forces. And they overtook somewhere around the teens decade. They got into charge, becoming responsible for the dominant share of world economic performance. You can see that on the left-hand chart. I want to bring your attention to the right-hand table, though, because here, if we just dwell for a moment, you will see some remarkable statistics. That over the period 2015 to 2025, the Chinese economy grows by 75%. A 3/4 improvement in the economy, almost doubling in the space of a decade. India does similar lifting, growing by 77% over the 2015 to 2025 period. These numbers are absolutely staggering. They talk about transformation. And notice that the circles that belong to the old guard, whilst they are positive, are very, very small. So this critical driver of global gravity amongst the G7 is diminishing. They are becoming a feeble force, and there is a new guard in charge. There's a neat way of showing this, and you can map the center of world economic gravity. The red spots show you, in a thought experiment, if we were to find the center of the world economy, where would it be? And you can see 1970 sits somewhere around the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and then each decade it steadily clips to the right and to the south. And this evidences what we would call the shift from north to south, that the global north is being displaced by the global south. And somewhere around 2030, the center of world economic gravity will sit in the Middle East, making its way towards India and China as they increasingly take charge. These are forces to be reckoned with. But economic gravity is just one ingredient when it comes to global power. What else matters? And the obvious place to go to is to look at military capability. And here I'll draw your attention to two pieces of evidence. The first is just the rise in recent times in military spending. If you look at that hollowing out in the mid-1980s, that's when the Berlin Wall had come down. People think, well, it's peace that reestablishes itself as the dominant force in the global new order. But once this period of this honeymoon glow, perhaps, had knocked itself off international affairs, the world gets back into the business of spending on military. And so from the mid-1990s onwards, this steady, can I say the steady march upwards? Work with me, come on. The steady march upwards in military spending. Now hold your breath and go to the right-hand side. So the world is spending more, but go across to the right-hand side and you'll see these new entrants that I've mentioned a couple of times. India and China now make up the top 10 in terms of military spend. So economic power is on the table and new military power is on the table. Over the past 200 years, it is overwhelmingly the large actor in war that wins. But if we break this up into 50-year periods, increasingly David beats Goliath. If you take the biblical tale, David beats Goliath. The small actor beats the big actor. It's a bit raw, it's very near, we don't yet know the full outcomes, but you could think of Israel, Palestine in recent times. You can certainly bring Russia, Ukraine into this analysis. Putin said this would be over in 6 weeks. Here we are, a couple of years later. So this is about asymmetric victory, where the small actor brings a surprise to the game. We could wind back and you might say, oh, but the United States has got all the military power. Yes, it does. That makes it the big actor in this global force. What about the small actors and what are they bringing to this battle? David Velez, the co-founder of Nubank in Brazil, says first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And what could that mean for the evidence that I'm leading here? Power gets even softer when you go beyond economic gravity and military gravity. It starts to become soft power, such as patents, copyrights. Look at the left-hand chart. This is China soaring past others. And this, in order to get awarded copyrights, you can't be copying someone. To patent someone, you can't be copying something. You have to be the originator of the idea. So if the suspicion remains for any bizarre reason that what China is about cheap knockoffs and copies, I would say banish that thought from between our ears. On the right-hand side, look at the data in terms of STEM graduates. This is absolutely staggering. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In 2020, China graduates 3.5 million students in these disciplines. India graduates 2.5 million. The rest start to look like rounding errors. India, each year, graduates 50 million students. Each year, India graduates the whole of South Africa. I mean, tell me this is not a force to be reckoned with. And now we can talk about this as soft power, because this isn't people going to battle, this isn't people going to war, this is people developing ideas, technologies, innovation. This is the stuff that dominates. And then the power gets even softer. I had to find a way to get Madonna into... But let's rewind to the 1980s, when the United States had swept the world stage in force. And now it's cultural power that's in charge. Pepsi, Miami Vice, Magnum. These are the brands that dominate the 1980s. Western brands, Northern brands. Madonna. Honorable mention. Softly, softly, the power comes. And so the G-Wagon will be displaced by the tank, GWM's tank. The exact same capability at a fraction of the price. K-pop is rising. We might have some Deezer fans. And this is the accompaniment with economic, military, intellectual, technological power of cultural power, soft forces. So what then, how do we make sense of this? What am I supposed to do with this? You know, it might be the thing that's going on in each of our heads. How on earth do I make sense of this shifting order? Global evidence in search of the 6 things that matter in geopolitics. And we scan literature over the past 50 years. And in scanning literature that captures the thinking and evidence and findings of the world's most brilliant brains, we are presented back with 6 things to give attention to. Geography, demography, who's having babies, war in all its shapes and forms, hot, cold, internal, external, climate, which is a quiet displacer, artificial intelligence, and politics, not policy. And when we speak about politics, we can quickly bring into the conversation our BRICS Plus, and then Jim O'Neill at Goldman Sachs made a small fortune coining the phrase BRICS. So I thought I would have a go, and so I brought cement. And, and cement stands for BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. This has been forced down our throats for the last 20-odd years. Cement, countries in emerging markets excluded by new terminology. That's my acronym. I mean, that gets like a small woo-woo. Something? Nothing? So here's some ideas to pay attention to. 3 quick ideas on how we get our heads around these 6 forces. I won't do all 6. The first is just geography, and it's not what sits on top of the land, it's what sits underneath the soil. Think of critical minerals, rare earth metals, etc. Who has their hands on the lithium? Who has their hands on the uranium? So on and so forth. And what role does the state play in access to those critical resources? That's one thing to think about in shaping this new world order. The second is the things that happen in, on, around the earth. This is climate change. And here too we have a spectacular disruptor, because what climate change will do is it will displace internally more than it forces people across borders, because it is very difficult for people to get across borders still, notwithstanding this narrative that we've got, the earth is flat and you can easily, swap countries. You can't. Only 3% of the world's population lives outside of their country of birth. So when climate change comes, or wherever we are in climate change, and it comes in the shape of displacement of people, watch for internal displacement rather than external displacement. This is a second big fracturer that is at play. And then the third big fracturer that is at play is artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning. All of our attention has been distracted by this thing called artificial intelligence. I make my a cheap, cheesy joke about look what my art capabilities did. That, of course, is AI. We analyze all of this literature on geopolitical forces using artificial intelligence, a deep, deep scan of 50 years of literature. But I don't think that artificial intelligence, or the way that we're seeing it now, is the big story. I think the big story is about to present itself, and it's what is called Q-Day. And Q-Day is the day that quantum computing becomes commercially available, that you can buy a quantum machine off the shelf. All of our processing to this point is binary. A processor is either on or off. And so you can break bank codes if you use linear processing and give it about 40 years. A quantum machine will break your bank code in minutes. And that displaces, dislocates, and fractures in an entirely different way. Quantum machines in that way are quite scary. They can also be incredibly powerful, because it's not just that they break security and technologies, they can also get into medicine, DNA sequencing, and think of the magnificent things that quantum machines could build in that way. But you might hear first word of caution: everything on WhatsApp is not safe. Those pictures. The quantum machines can get in there in moments. The temptation then is to forecast. I've made this argument to you before, so I won't dwell here. But the big argument is, right, now let's try and figure out what's coming at us. And I think that this is folly. Because if you just look backwards and imagine what you were able to forecast reliably to this point, might show what a nonsense our imagined ability is to forecast. We are not good at figuring out what's coming. So that then leaves us with sort of, what on earth am I supposed to do with this? Here I go to the Museum of Art, where they house Escher's fantastic staircase illustration. And when you look at this, start looking at it a little harder, it becomes an impossible picture, where every single staircase goes in both directions. It goes up and down. And so perhaps that's the strategic word of caution, is you could potentially be taken down the stairs through these disruptions, or there could be a fantastic ascent by walking on the exact same staircase of these six forces at play. What are we supposed to do then to change a descent into an ascent? And Jeff Bezos has got a lovely comment here where he says, people always ask me what's going to change. That's interesting. Perhaps the even more important question is, what's going to stay the same? What's not going to change? Here I'll show you two quick arguments in terms of big picture, what won't change. The first is that the context in which we work will continue to matter. It will remain the single biggest driver of business performance. Worry a lot about your external context. South Africa is in increasingly better shape. We now have, here's why you can't forecast, we have 500 days of uninterrupted electricity. Imagine if I told you this 500 days ago. So the economy remains the big driver. Second, the economy then translates quickly into business performance. And this explains more than half of company revenue growth. It explains more than half of company earnings growth. And these are the things that aggregate together to explain country performance. These 6 factors: savings, demography, policy, education, healthcare, and openness. Now we turn those 6 factors into a structural growth map, and the colors on the structural growth map show you who's likely to do well over the next 5 years. Notice where the dark greens are. Southeast Asia, a little more East Asia, and Africa. These are the new forces in charge. These are the economies that are going to do the lifting under our new global map. So what are you supposed to do now from a bottom-up perspective? What do you do as a business? 2 attributes: absorption, the ability to withstand shock, surprise, prepare for surprise; agility, prepare for change, build for change; obsess, don't worry, obsess about innovation. Greg's point, new models, new mindsets, go in search of new markets, search for the new. And be careful of this. Be careful of the guy who uses the word great, magnificent, brilliant, the best. You know who he is. Be careful of that, because that is called misinformation or disinformation. Be careful of this too. Be careful of the swiping. This shows you the content that is generated by artificial intelligence and the content that is generated by humans. Increasingly, we are reading stuff that is designed, built, written by machines. I caution you here about that too. This is original web content. Machines are writing the things that we are digesting as proof of life. India brings the Tata Nano. You can get a brand new car onto the road for $2,000. Time Bank, there is a fantastic book out about Time Bank. Fantastic book out about Time Bank. They have built in the space of the last 5 years 20 million customers. It is a remarkable story. 12 million in South Africa, 8 million in the Philippines. They're just starting in Indonesia. And then on the right-hand side, the reference here is to the Dutch coal mining business, which was told to stop mining, and today is one of the world's largest biotech businesses. It's a time for concern. It's a time for caution. It's a time for optimism. And with fracture, there is fantastic opportunity. I hope that is food for thought, calls for action, and I wish you a very successful auction. Thank you for your time.